True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick.
Kim Berry loved to dance, and she had plans to train as a nurse. Living with her parents in a suburb of Wollongong in New South Wales, Australia, she cared for disabled children in preparation for her future career. On Friday night, February 6, 1981, Kim's parents left town overnight, leaving her in charge of her little brother. Kim was usually very responsible, but, she also wanted to enjoy her freedom that night. After going to a movie with a girlfriend, the two girls headed to the local disco. Her friend left early, but Kim stayed on to drink and dance and have some fun. She was last seen chatting with a man named Graham Potter. Join us at the Quiet End today for The Girl Who Loved to Dance. Kim was a very kind girl with simple dreams of a nursing career and a family of her own, until one night of freedom put her into the hands of a killer.
So today's beer is another nice Australian beer from a brewery that I reviewed the last Australian case, Feral Brewing Company in Baskerville. Now, I've chosen Feral a couple times just because they're highly rated beers, and I know you Australians like your beer, and you wanted me to do something other than Foster's or whatever. So this is Watermelon Warhead from Feral Brewing Company. It's a Berliner Weiss, and it's only 2.9% alcohol by volume. Kind of amazing how great a beer this is for such a small amount of alcohol. But it is a very, very nice beer.
I mean, it does make it a good beer to have during the day because, a strong beer will put me to sleep all afternoon. But something like this I could have with lunch and be fine.
You should be able to.
Yeah.
So it's a pale yellow color, small white head, wonderful aroma. Pineapple, lemon, watermelon, some wheat, grain, that type of stuff. Tastes exactly as the nose suggested. This is a nicely tart beer, not overwhelmingly tart, just pleasantly tart. Great beer.
Let's open it up. It sounds great.
All right, I got a few of them.
It is delicious.
I thought you'd like it. You're a sour fan anyway.
I love sours. I mean, this isn't like a super sour. It's not my favorite, but it's very refreshing. It's a good summer sour, as we like to call it.
That's correct.
Yep. All right, so there's no Quiet End today. We're staying inside our little home studio, but still, we like to have the whole feeling of the Quiet End, and that's where we're going to go mentally right now, is to the Quiet End.
That's right. We're going to transport ourselves down to the Quiet End and toast all our virtual barmates.
Absolutely. We miss them all, really.
We do.
Yeah.
In 1981, Beverly and Brian Barry were hard-working middle-class people with two kids, 19-year-old Kim and 15-year-old Wayne. Now, the couple had arranged to take Friday, February 6th off from their jobs so they could visit their holiday home in Sawtell. Sawtell's a seaside town located on the north coast of New South Wales. It's about 600 kilometers, which is around 375 miles, from their home in Mount Pleasant, which is a suburb of Wollongong. Now, the Barrys hadn't been to Sawtell for quite a while, and they really needed to go and tend to the lawn, which had become overgrown, because the local council had warned them they were going to get fined if they didn't mow the grass soon. So this town has grass Gestapos, huh?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And this wasn't a fancy area. These were working people. But, they had some strict rules about the appearances, which isn't always a bad thing. You want to keep your property up. Yeah.
Well, you do. I don't think they had just totally left the lawn to go wild. And it's just a little unkempt.
Well, if you're not there for a couple weeks, it can get pretty long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can, but I still don't see why that's such a warning.
Yeah.
Anyway, That's what they're going to do. So
They're
going to go 375 miles to mow the lawn.
Well, okay, but they spent the night, so it was a little bit of a break anyway.
Right. Kim was given the job of watching after her little brother. He's a 15-year-old, by the way, although I think we mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not little, but he's not a kid you're going to leave alone overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
But she's going to watch him until Beverly and Brian came home on Saturday afternoon. Kim was working a retail job that Friday, and Wayne had track and field training to do, so they weren't going along on the trip. They were going to fend for themselves at home while Mom and Dad went up to Sawtell.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that Kim actually kind of didn't like going to Sawtell anymore. When she was 14, she'd been attacked by sand fleas, I guess really bad, leaving scars up and down her inner thighs. I mean, it was so bad that she wouldn't wear a bathing suit in front of people. You know, for a young girl, that's a big deal.
It sure is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go there. Sand flea dinner.
Yuck. So Beverly and Brian reported that they slept pretty well Friday night after working on the garden, and they returned to their Mount Pleasant home at 3 p.m. on Saturday, but they found Wayne home alone. Both parents were pretty upset when Wayne told them that Kim had stayed out all night and still wasn't home. She'd been gone since early Friday evening, so I think their first thought was, God damn it, those teenagers.
Yep, her brother knew she was going out with a friend.
Yeah.
So the parents probably thought that their daughter had shacked up with somebody or, doing teenage things.
Exactly. I mean, she wasn't the type to really do that, but most teenagers have a few episodes like that, right? She's 19. She's not a young teenager.
No, she's at the point where she's finished high school, I guess, and she's preparing for a career in nursing.
Right.
So.
But Wayne had no specifics about where his sister had gone. All he knew was that she went out Friday evening and never returned. When Wayne came home on Friday after his track practice, Kim was making his dinner and getting ready to go out, and she told him she was meeting with someone in Wollongong, but he couldn't remember who it was. Because who does he really care who she's meeting?
He doesn't.
No.
So after they ate the dinner that Kim had prepared, Kim cleaned up and went to the public phone booth down the street to call for a taxi. The Barrys didn't have a phone in their house, so they made all their calls from this phone box. And this was the last time that Wayne saw his sister. At this point, Beverly and Brian are just pretty angry at her for breaking her promise to watch her brother. Now, this anger is soon going to turn to concern.
Yeah, so for our youngsters out there, this was well before cell phones were about. And some people in working class areas didn't even have their own home phone. And back then, we went out without being able to contact people, and it was just normal, right? If someone went out for the night, you couldn't just text them or call them. So it's a whole different culture, really.
Oh, totally.
Than today, yeah. Kim's granddad, Brian's father, Dal, lived in a small apartment in the back of the Barrys' house. And he was really surprised that he hadn't seen Kim either. Dal and Kim were very close, and when she visited Wollongong, she would normally stop by Dal's favorite club and have a drink with him before she went off with her friends. So he had expected to see her Friday evening, but he said she never came by to see him. If Kim planned to stay over at a friend's house, there was a family rule that she needed to leave a note, and this was especially important as there was no phone in the home. Kim never stayed out all night without her parents' permission, and leaving 15-year-old Wayne at home alone was a real big no-no. Beverly looked around, but no note was left from Kim, and her anger over Kim's lack of responsibility was beginning to give way to worry as Saturday afternoon was moving into Saturday night. Now this is getting really strange. So Beverly took some change and she walked down to the public phone where she called Kim's friends. But no one had seen her. It was dawning on Beverly that Kim would not stay out all night when she'd been left in charge of Wayne. Something was wrong there.
Yeah, and at first Brian didn't have the same worry. He thought that Kim might have run into some friends and was just having too much fun to come on home. Now this disappointed him, and he was planning to give her a pretty harsh reprimand when she did show up. But that Saturday night, there still was no sign of Kim. Beverly is getting more and more anxious, and because of that, just didn't sleep at all. Sunday morning, Beverly began calling all of Kim's friends again. She checked with relatives and neighbors, but no one had seen her. Brian tried to calm Beverly. He was telling her that Kim was either partying through the weekend or she was avoiding them because she knew she was in trouble. Beverly hoped he was right, but nevertheless she had a pretty bad feeling about this.
Sure. That same day, an apprentice plumber named Scott Davies visited friends for lunch in Carrington Falls. And this is a few kilometers west of Jamboree Mountain. After lunch, he drove down a rough dirt road past the mountain lookout. So this is a beautiful area, but it's also rarely traveled. The narrow winding road, known as Jamboree Mountain Road, was usually avoided by tourists, and only locals visited the lookout. But once you got there, you could really enjoy a panoramic view of the coastline. Kids who stole cars and took them for joy rides would use this secluded area as a car graveyard. And after taking stolen vehicles for fast drives, they often stripped them of anything they could get cash for, and then just dumped what was left over the lookout. So Scott knew all about this. He's a young guy, and he knew he could come here and pick up spare parts for his own vehicle, much cheaper than going out and paying for them. So as he pulled up to this area, he's all alone, and he looked over the cliff to see what was available. All he saw were some rusted-out cars, and they were really below some heavy green overgrowth. To see what he could scavenge, Scott had gotten closer, and he did this by lying on his belly and just kind of scooting forward to look over the steep drop. But he still didn't get a really good look, so he was looking for a safe way to get down there. And that's when something strange caught his eye at the base of the tree. And his first thought was that someone was playing a sick joke and they'd left a mannequin to scare visitors. But he soon realized that he had seen a human body there. And, we know it's never a mannequin.
No, it isn't. So he was pretty frightened, and he just sort of scrabbled away from the edge. When he got back to the path, there was a young couple who was just arriving. So Scott was pretty relieved. He told them that he had seen a body. The man left his girlfriend in their car and followed Scott. He saw the body, though the head and shoulders were hidden beneath the tree's branches. Just then, a vehicle from the National Parks and Wildlife Service showed up. And I think this is just kind of routine stuff that he hadn't been called, right? He's just doing
their rounds. Yeah.
So Scott and the other guy flagged down the ranger and told him what they had seen. They couldn't make out much, but the body appeared to be female, and it appeared to be naked. When the police arrived at the scene, they were able to look with a pair of binoculars, and they saw a female body in a crouched position with the ankles bound. They believed that the head of the victim was obscured by the tree, but when they were able to approach the body, they saw that the head had been removed.
Can you imagine coming across that?
Yeah, it's not bad enough to find a dead body, but now you're finding a headless dead body?
It's a nightmare.
Holy cow.
That's the kind of thing that'll never leave your mind either, right?
Right.
Whenever you let things be quiet and close your eyes, that's going to pop into your head. It's traumatic.
Well, it gets more traumatic, too.
Yeah, so the scene had to be examined before the body could be removed, of course. And Sergeant Bernie Walsh of the Scientific Investigation Branch arrived there, along with the Sydney Homicide Squad. Using a harness and ropes, Walsh was lowered to the scene, and photos were taken from all angles. When the headless body was carefully turned over, the left arm fell off to the side, and that's when they saw that all of the victim's fingers had been amputated. And the right arm revealed the same thing. So the beheading and finger removal indicated that the killer didn't want the victim to be identified, of course. This is 1981, so DNA is not in use, and without dental records or fingerprints to check, identification really couldn't be made conclusively.
So the body was removed, but the scene needed to be guarded overnight to keep the public and the press away. The government medical officer was on holiday, so an autopsy was planned for Monday, February 9th. Police hoped that forensic tests on a blouse found around the arms of the body would help identify the victim. The press had heard about the murder, and they're calling with questions, and the police, though, had very little to share. They were questioning if the killing had been drug-related. Was it a sexual attack? What was the cause of death? but the chance of identifying the victim soon was pretty slim. To try and identify the victim, investigators decided to get palm prints and cross-check them with those on file. Because at that time anyway, palm prints were taken whenever an offender was processed for any crime. So they're going to look for any female with drug-related charges.
Right, but there's already a tip-off here that maybe it wasn't drug-related, because usually in these drug-related horrific crimes where the head is removed, the entire hands are removed, not just the fingers. So that was a little bit of a tip-off there, that it wasn't just your typical, if there is such a thing, drug-related murder.
Yeah, because she just had fingertips or fingers amputated.
Yeah. So the media latched on to the idea that the young woman had been a victim of a drugland-style execution. Police believed that it was possible, but not probable, because only the fingers, not the entire hands, had been removed. So if this victim had been involved in drug trafficking, police would really expect the hands to have been completely severed, because these would be criminals that would do it, right? And they would know that palm prints were taken when people were arrested. Some detectives felt like the bra and the blouse should be displayed to the public in order to help and get this girl identified. But others argued it was too gruesome to display. It hadn't been done before. But eventually the decision was made to display the clothing because the longer this victim is unidentified, the longer the investigation is held up.
Well, sure, you really don't even know where to start if you can't identify the body.
And this is fairly common now to display clothing and things like that. You know, unless it's something you want to keep for your investigation, to have something no one would know but the killer.
Right.
So on Monday, February 9th, the press conference was held at the Jamboree Mountain Lookout, and it was announced on the radio on Sunday night. But Beverly Berry was too involved in looking for her daughter to really pay much attention to the news. Monday morning, one local paper had the headline, "Pregnant Woman Slain, Headless Body Dumped Over Cliff." Kim's friend Donna Holland called Beverly. Beverly hadn't known her number to call her over the weekend, but Donna had been anxious. She told Beverly she was really concerned that this body that had been found on the mountain could be Kim. Donna had heard on the radio that the dead woman had Band-Aids on the heels of her feet, and she remembered that Kim had used Band-Aids when she was with her on Friday night because her shoes were cutting into her heels. So Donna was the girl that was out with Kim, and Beverly hadn't known that before. But still, Beverly kind of dismissed the possibility that there was a connection between Kim and the dead woman, and who can blame her? Also, she'd read in the paper that the victim was pregnant, and Kim wasn't pregnant, so it couldn't be her. Donna agreed with that, but they were both getting more and more worried about Kim. Beverly had a very bad feeling. So Donna told Beverly about her night out with Kim. She and Kim had gone to see a movie, and afterwards they had gone to the Crown Gardens disco. Donna had to babysit early Saturday morning, and she'd gone home around midnight, leaving Kim behind at the disco.
So investigators searched through the heavy growth around the lookout and checked the discarded vehicles. There was a recently burnt-out car that was found. That's the most recent car. Everything else was older. While investigators processed the scene where the body had been found, the government medical officer performed the autopsy. Now, he couldn't identify what had been used to sever the neck and hands, but the fingers appeared to have been sawed, while the neck seemed to have been cut with a sharp instrument. Cut showed no skill, but it appeared to have been done carefully after death. There's a bone in her right forearm that had been broken, and there was also bruising on her left shoulder and chest that were noted.
Yeah, under her right breast, the examiner found a birthmark. There was also tissue scarring on the insides of the thighs, and of course the Band-Aids on both heels, also a Band-Aid on the left elbow. Ligature marks were left on her ankles and her right wrist, and the examination showed that she was not and had never been pregnant. I guess the body had just been bloated by being exposed or whatever, and that led some to believe she'd been pregnant. So it was probably a journalist or an inexperienced police officer that had drawn an incorrect conclusion, and then a local paper had picked it up and printed it. So at this press conference, police displayed the top and the bra that were found on the body, and they also corrected the misreported story that the woman had been pregnant. That afternoon, the newspapers ran an updated story. So the Daily Mirror wrote, "Police found a burnt-out car today near where a woman's headless body was discovered yesterday. Police believe the woman's body may have been driven to the dumping scene in the car. Her fingers were cut off in what police believe was a drug ring execution. The woman was aged between 20 and 35, 167 centimeters tall, and of medium or solid build. And the body has a brown birthmark under the right breast."
So when Beverly Berry came home from work that Monday evening, she was hopeful that she would find her daughter there watching TV or listening to one of her records. Her worry was taking over by this time, but she tried to occupy herself with making dinner while Wayne and Brian were at Wayne's track practice. Then Beverly turned on the news. Details were being given about the female body found at Jamboree Mountain. Footage was shown of a detective standing over a torn, dirty blouse and bra. Beverly thought she recognized them, ran to Kim's room to look through her closet and bureau. She couldn't find the blouse and bra, but told herself they must be in the laundry. But no, they weren't there either. So that's the moment, according to Beverly, when she knew that Kim was dead. The body found at Jamboree Mountain had to be her daughter. At that point, Beverly collapsed and just melted.
Well, sure. What a horrible thing. So it was a little after 6 p.m. that evening when Donna Holland, Kim's friend, called the Wollongong PD. She reported that a friend of hers had the same blouse as the one shown on the news, and that no one had heard from her since Friday night. Brian and Wayne arrived home to find Beverly crying and waiting for them at the back door. She told Brian that they had to go to the police station. She had seen Kim's clothing on the news, and the body found was Kim's, she was certain. So Brian hoped against hope that she was wrong, and that there was just a mix-up. But of course he agreed to go with Beverly to the police station, and they left Wayne at home where he waited for his grandfather to get home. Brian and Beverly were interviewed by 2 detectives at the police station. They described Kim's birthmark and also the scarring that she had on her inner thighs since she was 14. She'd gotten them from sand flea bites during the beach vacation, and they were fairly prominent. So the detectives knew just from those descriptions that Kim was likely the victim. So they showed the Berries the clothing. The blouse was torn down the middle and it was covered with dirt, but Beverly recognized it by the size and the brand on the label, so she did identify the clothing as Kim's. It's really unthinkable, but Beverly and Brian had to identify the body of their daughter. So they went to the hospital morgue with the detective, and to try and spare the parents some of the horror, the body was prepared with cloth covering the neck and the hands. Brian was a former naval serviceman and safety officer, so he decided he would be the one to go into the viewing room and identify the body, save his wife from that trauma. Brian had seen terrible injuries and even deaths in his time at sea, but nothing's going to prepare him here to see his daughter in such a dreadful condition. But, he's trying hard to be strong for his wife. So Brian identified Kim, but under the coroner's rules, the body still needed to be positively identified by finding a matching palm print. Kim had no history of drug offenses. In fact, she was never known to have used any drugs. So an officer from the fingerprint department went to the Berry home and dusted Kim's bedroom. They were able to find a matching print on the side of her wardrobe. So this matched the body conclusively, and Kim was definitely the murdered woman. So this news, of course, was devastating.
Telling Kim's granddad, Dal, proved to be very difficult. He and Kim had a very close relationship. She called him Pop, and he was the only person she allowed to call her Kimmy. So the two were more like friends than grandfather and granddaughter. They talked about everything. He loved her youthful enthusiasm, and she appreciated his wisdom. He had often warned Kim about staying out late and he had warned her of meeting the wrong type of person. But Kim was young and invincible. She'd shrug off the warnings, say, "Nothing's ever going to happen to me." These words replayed over and over in Pop's mind. Kim certainly was precious to him and to her whole family. She was irreplaceable, and none of them would ever be the same with her gone. The family grieved alone in their little house, unable to believe that someone could be so evil to such a kind, sweet girl.
Yeah, so the Berry home was just filled with sadness, and Brian showed a lot of anger over his daughter's murder. This was actually the second child they had lost. Another son, Brett, had died at a young age. He was born after Kim, but the Berrys never spoke publicly about how he had died. So they were very private people, and they grieved privately for Brett, and that's how they grieved for Kim. So they weren't the type of people that were out talking to the media or really getting too involved in that, at least publicly. They were private, and they just kind of stuck together and tried to help each other through this. The police were pleased to have an identification so early in the investigation. This allowed them to move forward as they traced Kim's movements on that Friday night. Her brother Wayne was interviewed, and he told him what he had already told his parents. Kim had been in a good mood, and she was looking forward to her night out with Donna. Beverly had already spoken to investigators about Kim being with Donna, and of course Donna herself had contacted them. She was an important witness, of course. They had met and become good friends that past September. Donna had been having problems at home, and Kim had been someone she could really talk to. So they spoke or went out together nearly every day. They were just in constant contact. Donna remembered Kim as someone who always made her laugh. And she brought up New Year's Eve when she and Kim had ended up leaving a party to toast each other outside on the curb in their fancy dresses. The whole town had a party-like atmosphere that night, and people walked by them sharing a sip of their wine. So it was a great memory for Donna. Donna was actually 2 years younger than Kim, and she was in shock as she was interviewed by police. The entire experience seemed surreal to her. She tried to remember details of that Friday night, but, she was nervous, so it took a little prodding from detectives to get details from her. Her recollection of that Friday began at 7:30 p.m. when she met Kim outside of a shopping complex in Wollongong. Kim arrived by taxi, and Donna had taken the bus there. Kim had been wearing the beige blouse that was found with her body. She also had on some harem-style pants that were baggy and narrowed at her ankles. She carried a brown-colored clutch purse, and she was wearing high heels. Kim and Donna were going to a movie that started at 7:45, so they decided to check in on Pop at his ex-serviceman's club. They had him paged there, but he didn't answer. So still having a few minutes before the movie, they went to another club, where Kim had a Kahlua and milk and Donna had a lemonade. And after having their drinks, they went to the movie, and the movie lasted until 10:10 p.m.
And Donna had planned to go home after the movie, because she had to get up early Saturday for a babysitting job. Also, she wasn't quite feeling 100%, and thought she might be coming down with the flu or some illness. But as they walked towards the Wollongong train station, Kim convinced Donna to go to the Crown Club disco, which she agreed to do, at least for a while. So, and as they were walking over, Kim complained that her shoes were cutting into her heels. So they stopped at a drugstore, and Kim bought some Band-Aids, put one on each of her heels. Then they walked a little further, stopping at a milk bar, where Donna bought a piece of chicken and ate it. So in Australia, a milk bar is like a 7-Eleven or something like that.
Yeah, but it's not a chain. It's usually more of a mom and pop thing, I think.
Right.
We've run across it in a few of our stories from Australia.
Yeah, but you can get, various things.
Yeah, food, newspapers, candy.
Yeah.
Probably cigarettes. So when Donna and Kim arrived at the disco, they paid $3 cover charge, and one of the bouncers immediately asked Kim for a dance, and she promised she would dance with them later. So the two girls sat on a lounge in the back of the disco, and using $2 that Donna had given her, Kim bought a Tia Maria and milk for herself, and Donna had another lemonade. Kim toasted herself then, joking around and saying she hoped soon that she would find a steady boyfriend. So this disco had a Tahitian dance show that the girls watched, and when it ended, Kim went to the bar to get change for the cigarette machine. They talked for a while, and Kim asked Donna if she would spend the night at her place. She said she didn't want to be there without her parents because she'd heard there was a prowler in the area. And Donna really thought that Kim might have been making up this whole prowler story just to get her to go home with her. Also, Donna had to be up at 5 a.m. to babysit. She'd already made plans with her mother to pick her up at the train station that night, so she needed to take the last train, the midnight train, in order to meet her mom. But Kim was persistent. She suggested that Donna call her mom and cancel. She said she wanted to stay at the disco until it closed at 3 a.m., and then they could take a taxi back to her house. But Donna said no thanks. She really wasn't feeling well, and she wanted to leave the smoky disco. So finally Kim accepted Donna's plans, but she borrowed a little money from her. She bought a bottle of Liebfrauwein, and this was Kim's favorite wine. Kind of an unusual choice, really. But it was almost midnight by then, and Donna had to leave. Donna's last words to Kim were, "Be careful and catch a taxi home. Give me a ring tomorrow afternoon."
Then on Saturday, when Kim didn't call her, Donna thought it was kind of strange, because they usually talked every day, and she was also expecting to make plans with Kim for the rest of the weekend. But no Kim. She told detectives that after Kim bought the Band-Aids, she had tried to fit the box into Kim's purse, but it wouldn't fit. So Donna had put the Band-Aid box in her own purse. They asked her what she saw in Kim's bag at that time. Donna said that Kim's bag was a small vinyl clutch in a semicircular shape. Inside she saw a pack of Dunhill cigarettes, a gold lighter, a lipstick, and a brush to apply the lipstick with, inside of a little holder.
So Donna recalled that Kim had $4 in her purse for the taxi ride home. Police took her back to the disco to have her reenact their movements. She did what they asked, but nothing new came out of this. Donna was still in shock, but of course she was willing to do anything to help find Kim's killer. Donna didn't sleep well, and she was also having a lot of guilt because she'd left Kim at the club that night. There were a lot of what-ifs, and that's hard to deal with. On Tuesday, as Kim's family and friends were still in shock over Kim's murder, a 20-year-old woman named Sherry Jones was looking for her fiancé. She and Graham Potter, a 23-year-old coal miner, were to be married on Valentine's Day, Saturday, February 14th. Graham Potter had left a message for Cherie to say that he couldn't see her, but he'd talk to her later. Cherie was expecting to go to their Tuesday night dance class together, where they were learning their bridal waltz. And this was the first time that Graham had missed one of these lessons. He had been the one who insisted that the entire bridal party learn to waltz correctly. So Graham's message was calm, but Cherie felt there was definitely something wrong. She called his parents, her parents, and a friend of hers, asking them to meet her at Graham's apartment. Graham's brother Glenn had also gotten a call from Graham that afternoon, and he had told Glenn he was going away for a while. So Glenn thought that his brother must have gotten cold feet about the wedding. Graham had been engaged before and he'd backed out. And he often talked about traveling around Australia before he settled down. But Cherie was very upset.
This is like 5 days before the wedding.
Well, yeah.
Holy cow. Well, you can't do this to me at this point.
Well, yeah, she felt he was backing out and rejecting her. Cherie's mom knew that Graham was going to see an attorney that morning to make up a will, and Cherie's dad was also aware of this. He had followed up by calling the attorney, and he was told that Graham had been to meet him and that he had said he was going away because he was in some kind of trouble. But Graham's dad was keeping this information from Cherie for the time because she was really worked up. She was upset. He had given a letter addressed to Cherie, to the attorney, which the attorney had mailed for him, but the attorney didn't know what the letter had said.
Then on Wednesday, February 11th, information about Kim Barry's murder was in the papers and on the news. There was speculation that Kim was killed by a psychopath. Kim had no history of drug use, so the drug-related stories were dropped. Now, the common headline in the newspapers was "The Girl Who Loved to Dance." There were articles upon articles written about her passion for dancing and her plans to become a nurse, her volunteer work with children. Kim was just a well-liked person and not into drugs or really any mischievous behavior.
Now, 2 years earlier, Kim had left her family home to work as a nursing assistant at the Royal South Sydney Hospital, and she had sat for her exams there. She had really good grades, but she tested poorly, and she ended up failing the entrance test for nursing school. She returned home after that, but she was planning to go back and try again. She wasn't going to give up. After interviewing dozens of people, the police had concluded that there was no truth to Kim's claim that there was a prowler in her neighborhood. So they believed, like Donna did, that the story was just an attempt to get Donna to stay with her that night. Megan, the barmaid at the Crown Gardens Disco, had a record book where she entered everything that she sold. On that Friday night, she had recorded only one purchase of Liebfrauwein. The purchase had been made by Kim Barry. She identified a photo of Kim as the woman that she had sold this to, and she had also mentioned seeing Donna Holland. But Megan did remember things a bit differently than Donna did. Megan said that both girls came to the bar, Donna had paid for the wine, and then they'd gone back to sit on the lounge. So, just a little variation in memory, which is not unusual.
No, that's not of any consequence. So early Wednesday morning, Cherie Jones's mother went to the post office. She wanted to get Cherie's letter from Graham released to her. She explained that Graham had left with no explanation, and Cherie was becoming hysterical. Now, the postmaster knew the family, so he eventually gave her the letter. And to Mom's credit, she didn't open it and read it herself. She took it home. And Cherie opened it. It was short and cryptic. In the letter, Graham apologized and said it broke his heart to leave her. He said that he would call her to explain at some point. Cherie went to Graham's parents and showed them the letter. Graham's mother told Cherie about Graham's visit to an attorney and what the attorney had said about Graham being in some sort of trouble. Cherie was so upset that a doctor had to be brought to the house to sedate her.
Now that seems a little over the top, right? I mean, this is not a death or anything. This is just he didn't show up for the wedding. It's a big deal, but to have to be sedated, that's a little crazy.
Well, how old is she?
Well, I don't know, but she's in a tizzy.
Yeah.
I guess she's not very old if he's 23, but still. Get a grip, girl. You got to toughen up if you're going to deal with life, right?
Well, I can see her doing that.
Yeah, I can see it. But come on, it's not like she's just upset. They're bringing a doctor in?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's over the top.
So homicide detectives believe that Kim had met her killer, or killers, at the disco, or maybe soon after she had left. Autopsy results showed that Kim had an empty stomach with no trace of any poisons. Her blood alcohol was negative.
Yeah, so no alcohol in her blood at all.
Right.
Which is a little strange because she had been drinking.
Well, apparently not heavily enough.
Yeah, or maybe a little time had passed before she actually died.
Yep. Kim's blood type was Group A PGM, which is phosphoglucomutase 2+1-. This is a relatively rare type. PGM is an enzyme in blood cells, and it was widely used for forensic work before DNA testing became available. So Kim's particular type would be found in only 1% of the population. Tests for sexual assault were negative. There had been no trauma or semen found.
So within 1 week of Kim's death, the police had put together a mannequin with clothing and a wig similar to Kim from the night she was at the disco. A photo of Kim was also put near this mannequin with a sign that said, "Did you see this girl last Friday night?" So this is pretty clever. A police caravan was parked near the disco, and 2 detectives stood in the club. They were with the mannequin, which was standing near the lounge where Kim and Donna had been sitting on Friday. So patrons could approach the detectives, and if they had anything to share, they were directed to the caravan to give a formal statement. So they received a lot of leads this way. But there was nothing really mind-blowing, nothing that was going to crack the case. But I think it was a pretty smart thing to do.
Well, I think they needed to do something. They weren't getting very far, had very little. So they needed to do whatever they thought they could do to get some information on Kim.
Well, yeah, and this would be a crowded place, so there's a possibility of finding a lot of witnesses.
Right.
And even something little they might remember, of course, could be crucial to the investigation.
Yeah, so Graham Potter and Cherie Jones's wedding was canceled.
Had to be.
Yeah, no groom.
No groom is a problem.
So Graham had disappeared. Still, many guests showed up, and they were in sympathy with Cherie. There was one young man named Victor Bernasconi who began putting together information that concerned him. And he had enough presence of mind that he decided to contact his brother, Jeffrey, who was a member of the Wollongong Highway Patrol. So Victor told Jeffrey that Graham Potter had disappeared, which people were finding out anyway. But he had also heard that Graham had been at the Crown Gardens disco on the Friday when the headless girl had been there.
Yeah, right. So I have to give this guy some credit. This is a young guy who's putting this information together and being forthright about it. Too many people don't speak up, either out of fear or some kind of sense of loyalty. So this was good.
It was.
So on Valentine's Day, Jeffrey reported to detectives that his brother was planning to attend a wedding that day, but that the ceremony had been canceled because the groom, Graham Potter, had left town. On the Friday when Kim Barry was last seen, Graham Potter had been having his Bucks Night, which I'm assuming is his bachelor party, at the Crown Gardens disco.
Sure, Bucks and Does, right?
Yeah. Now his whereabouts were unknown, of course, and detectives received more reports about Graham, the missing groom. But, he's still just one in a list at this point of possible suspects. But it's an interesting thing, for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, if he had been at the disco the same time as Kim, and now Kim's dead and he's vanished.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely want to talk to him.
Very suspicious.
Detectives had 2 interesting statements given by sisters Merrill and Kathy Elphick. They had given the statement on the night when the mannequin had been set up at the disco. So the girls mentioned spending time with Glenn Potter on Friday, February 6th. And when they were questioned, Kathy and Merrill both said that they knew Graham Potter. They were drinking with his brother Glenn, and they saw Graham sitting on one of the lounges with a girl. Later that night, Graham walked over to them and left his cardigan and a bottle of wine on their table and left the disco. When asked what brand of wine it was, the sisters both answered, Liebfrauwein.
So this was a big break, right? Because only one bottle of that wine had been sold that night, and it was sold to Kim.
Bingo.
And now we know that he was with her. So, of course, they check his records, and police records for Graham Potter included 2 convictions for breaking and entering and theft. He was given 3 years good behavior bond and a $250 fine. His parents, Sonny and Dawn Potter, were contacted. They wanted to interview Glenn, and they wanted to search Graham's apartment. So Sonny, Graham's dad, did not believe that Graham would break the law. His parents really believed in him. Makes it sad. So Sonny agreed that he would meet the detectives at Graham's apartment to let them look around. He had a key. So you kind of need to know here that the Potters were a very close family. The family had traveled together when Glenn and Graham were younger, And of course, these parents are going to stand up for their son no matter what. They used to show prize-winning border collies and travel around with that. And Dawn remembered that there was only one time when Graham had not traveled with them. At the time, one of their female dogs was pregnant, and Graham had stayed behind to take care of her. But when they returned home, Dawn was shocked because she didn't hear the dog barking, and the dog was a big barker. But Graham came out of the family home with this sad look on his face. He said their pregnant dog had died. Although there was no known reason why she would have suddenly died. She didn't go to the vet, and Dawn figured that the dog must have died from some kind of complication with her pregnancy. But maybe not. It's kind of scary.
In hindsight, yeah. I think as it actually happened, pregnant dog, maybe there'd been some complications.
But wouldn't you call him and take him to the vet?
Not if it happened quickly.
Okay. I still think it's a little weird.
Well, yeah.
And we'll hear a little more about it, too.
Graham had been a talented athlete in high school. When he turned 16, he wanted to travel, so he was allowed to visit his aunt and uncle in the Northern Territory. But Graham and his uncle didn't get along, so he hitchhiked south and got a job with Queensland Railways. Once on his railway job, 2 of Graham's co-workers were killed in an accident. He, another man, and 2 Aboriginal men were out one evening and used a hand pump cart for transportation. On the way home, Graham said he heard a train, but the others didn't believe him. As they rounded a bend on the tracks, a train came at him. Graham and 1 man jumped and survived. The 2 Aboriginal men were killed.
So, kind of suspicious, because we know that there can be a lot of bias against the Aboriginal people, by some really shitty people. And Graham might have been one of those shitty people.
Could have been.
So you have to wonder. Of course, there's no proof that he did anything wrong. It's just something to kind of keep in your mind. But after that, he did return home and he did finish school. He met Cherie Jones in 1979, and on New Year's Eve, they became engaged and planned their wedding for Valentine's Day 1981. Everything was going according to plan. They even purchased some land to build a house. And everything seemed fine until he disappeared without warning on Tuesday, February 10th, 1981. And that's the Tuesday following the Friday when Kim Berry was killed. Detectives searched Graham's apartment with his father Sonny there, and Sonny showed them a saw that Graham had borrowed in order to cut some pipes to use as security on sliding windows. The apartment was nearly empty, as Sonny had put his son's belongings in storage, and it was actually pretty immaculate, like it had been recently cleaned. Cherie was interviewed by detectives on February 19th, and she was still in a state of shock, and she was taking sedatives. She was only asked a few questions, but she did tell them that Graham had left in her car. He didn't own a car, and Cherie had let him use hers whenever he wanted. So a bolo was issued for the car, a 1970 white Holden sedan, and Cherie also gave the detectives a photo of Graham.
Then when detectives talked to his brother Glenn, he was reluctant, and more so, even bordering on being hostile. Glenn said that Friday, February 6th was his birthday and Graham's Bucks night. Glenn had showed up at Graham's at about 7:30. They were at another club with friends until they went to the Crown Gardens disco. This was around midnight. Just before Glenn went to get drinks, a girl walked up and began talking to Graham. He described the girl as short, with shoulder-length dark hair. She wore a white knee-length dress. He wasn't sure if it was a dress, but he had seen this girl before at other clubs.
Yeah, so Glenn said that Graham had walked away and joined the girl on a lounge. And about 1 a.m., Glenn and another friend decided to go to a different disco, the Cascades Disco. Glenn noticed then that Graham was still on the lounge with the dark-haired girl. Glenn and his friend Barney went to the Cascades for a while and returned after about half an hour. Graham had left his cardigan and the bottle of wine with Glenn, and when he returned, he was alone. And Glenn asked him, how did it go? and he told Glenn that the girl got cold feet at the door and walked away. So I think it was understood between these two brothers that he was planning to go have sex with this girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he said he came straight back, but on the way, in the taxi, he had stopped to pick up a hitchhiker who he assumed was a sailor on his way to the naval base. So that's why it took him a little longer than Glenn would have expected. That's what Graham said.
Yeah.
So about 2:45, they left the disco and took a taxi to Graham's apartment. Glenn said that Graham cooked some eggs, made some coffee, and then went up to bed. Glenn was sleeping downstairs on the couch, while Graham slept upstairs in his room. Graham left the next morning at 8 a.m. that Saturday, and Glenn was shown a photo of Kim, but he couldn't be sure if she was the girl who was with Graham at the disco, although she matches the general description.
She does. Cherie was interviewed for a second time, and this time she seemed less upset. She said that she saw Graham that Saturday before he left, and they spent the remainder of the weekend together. On Monday, she noticed that he was quiet and just not his usual self. He asked her about traveling around Australia with him, and Cherie told him she wanted to marry and settle down. So they argued. Graham was saying if they didn't do it now, they never would. He went to the bank that day and withdrew $2,900, and he wanted the money in denominations of tens.
So that's weird.
Very weird. Now he told Cherie that he planned to open a joint account. They did some shopping later in the day, but Graham did not use any of the money that he had withdrawn to pay for the stuff.
And he didn't open a joint account either.
He's planning on it.
But I mean, even if you don't know about the murder, he's kind of a sketchy person, right? You're getting that vibe.
Yeah, a little bit. My twitches are going off, but they're not too bad yet.
No. But on Tuesday, February 10th, Graham did give Cherie a ride to work, and that day he canceled their lunch date. He left a message with a friend of hers saying that he couldn't pick her up from work and he wouldn't be going to the dance class that evening. So that was the last time that Cherie had heard from Graham. So she's all worked up.
She sure is. Then on Saturday, February 28th, Kim's skull was found off a creek bed near Jamboree Mountain. The skull was in an upright position on the ground. Didn't have any flesh or hair, and at first it seemed too decomposed to belong to Kim, but inspection revealed that animals had dragged it away and fed off of it.
Ugh.
And it was identified as Kim's by the records from her orthodontist. When the area where the skull was found was searched, dark hair was noticed in the Dry Creek area.
Yeah, investigators actually followed a trail of dark hair along the forest floor. And then they found a sleeve from a blue dressing gown. And I think in Australian speak, a dressing gown is what we would call a robe. And this was protruding from a large black plastic bag. And 2 bags were under a thick bush, and they appeared to have been disturbed by animals as well. So investigators found actually a trail of finger bones at this site along with the hair. Inside of the bags, they found 2 blood-stained sheets. One was floral and one was striped, and they also found the dressing gown. The gown actually had a depression the size of the skull in it, with dark hair and some decomposing tissue and finger bones in it. So it looked like the skull and fingers had been wrapped up in the gown and put in the bag.
Yeah, Cherie was shown the dressing gown and the sheets. The striped sheet matched what she had seen in Graham's apartment, and the gown looked like one he owned, but she couldn't identify the other sheet, the floral sheet. After seeing the items, she returned to her parents in a hysterical state.
Oh, can you imagine if she had to be medicated because of the wedding?
Yeah.
This must have put her over the top.
This would really set her off, right?
She was just going fucking nuts at this point.
She said that one of the detectives suggested that Graham had killed Kim Barry.
Oh my God, well, how was she going to deal with that?
Holy cow. So police had Graham's apartment tested forensically and found traces of blood in the sink drain and on one of the taps in the bathroom. 2 more bloodstains were found in the spare bedroom. Carpet was pulled up from a corner, and soaked-through blood was found on the floorboards. Hairs matching Kim's were found in fresh paint on the floorboards and in his clothes dryer, and all of the blood stains match Kim's blood type, which, as we mentioned previously, was shared by fewer than 1% of the population.
Right, so things aren't looking good with Graham.
Well, it's looking more and more like he could be the perpetrator, right?
Well, sure, and what about this 1%? So only 1% of the population has this blood type. But then, how many people have been killed? And how many people was Graham spending time with at the disco? I'm not a math person, but I think you could probably put together an equation there that would make it very likely that he was Kim's murderer.
Oh, sure.
So police were theorizing that Graham had killed her in the spare bedroom, and then he decapitated her and removed her fingers in the bathroom. They found long scratches on the bathtub surface. Graham's belongings, which were being stored at his parents' house, also included a hacksaw, some bloody sheets, and a dressing gown cord that matched the dressing gown that was found in the bag with Kim's finger bones. So the tie for the robe for us American people.
Yeah.
Graham's parents clearly believed that their son had nothing to hide. They were going to back him up pretty much no matter what, even though they were very cooperative with the police's search because they genuinely thought he had nothing to do with it. And after the search, Sonny and Dawn Potter went to the scientific section of the police department where they were shown the items that were recovered with Kim's skull and finger bones. It's important to note that when shown the dressing gown, Dawn moved her hand to her mouth and said, "That's the gown I gave to Graham as a young boy." Now, she couldn't identify the sheets, but still.
Yeah, got the gown.
And you think that would give her some pause.
You would.
But Graham's going to have a very complicated story that he thinks can explain all this.
So Cherie Jones's car was found near the police station. It had been there since February 10th. Inside the car, there was a love letter from Graham to Cherie, and there was a shirt stained with Kim's blood. So as the case strengthened against Graham Potter, on March 3rd, homicide detectives decided to release his name with a description and photo to the media. They didn't say he was a suspect, but they did say he had crucial information for the investigation.
And he is absolutely the suspect. The only suspect.
He's the only one.
So Graham's parents had never heard the name Kim Barry before the murder. Donna Holland had never heard of Graham either. But Beverly Barry, Kim's mom, was familiar with the name Graham Potter. She recalled Kim telling her that she was interested in a young man by that name when she took a dance class. And years later, Beverly had asked Kim about it, and Kim said she was no longer interested. She said that she thought he was just too much of a ladies' man, and she had grown up enough to know better than to go after guys like that.
That's right.
But that shows us that she probably did have an attraction to him, so if he was flirting with her at the club, it's not unheard of that she may have left with him. I could see that happening.
Sure, that's true.
Right. But police were continuing also to speak with acquaintances of Graham. A friend from school told police about the death of the family's pregnant border collie. And according to the friend, Graham had invited him over that weekend when they were both 14. And he said that Graham was inserting suppositories into the dog until she died.
Well, that puts a different spin on it.
So what the ever-loving fuck is that about? What do they mean suppositories? Like laxative suppositories?
Stool softeners.
And how would that kill her?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, there are lots of drugs that come in suppositories, so who knows?
Exactly. And these people breeded border collies.
Right.
So there are likely to be plenty of medications around.
But if that's true, he's super sick. He's a real sicko.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So there was some speculation that Graham had maybe fled to New Zealand. He talked about that before. And back in 1981, you didn't have to have a passport to travel from Australia to New Zealand. So that was a possibility.
Now, after Kim's skull was cleaned up, the medical officer noted that a large missing portion was a rectangular fracture. He also noticed that Kim's right-hand fingers had been sawed off, and on the left hand they had been crushed and snapped off.
Ugh, that's just brutal. Alive or dead, that's a brutal thing to do to a human body.
Truly is.
So on April 11th, Cherie and Sonny both received phone calls from Graham. Sonny wanted to hear where his son was and why he had left, but he still didn't believe that Graham had killed Kim Barry. He did think, though, that he might have some information that would help the investigators. Sonny would say that he questioned Graham and that Graham passed his test, so he didn't believe his son was lying to him. So Sonny and Dawn wrote down what Graham had told them and gave it to his attorney.
Graham showed up at his parents' house with his hair dyed red and a full beard. He told his parents that he had been approached by a girl he knew as Kim, and she told him she was afraid of two men who were after her. He said he walked outside of the disco with her, and they got a taxi to his apartment. When they were at the apartment, Graham said that the two men burst into his apartment. The men ordered Graham upstairs, and Kim told him it was okay. But as he was waiting in the upstairs bedroom, he heard muffled sounds, and when it became quiet, he went downstairs and saw Kim lying on the floor. He was grabbed and roughed up by one of the men. He managed to escape the men and took a taxi back to the club. He did have a ticket, so after some arguments with the bouncers, he was allowed back into the club.
Yeah, so when you'd pay your entrance fee, they'd give you a ticket so you could leave and come back.
Yeah, now this is just a fantastic story, isn't it?
Yeah, let's talk about that a little. Because if these men were after her for some drug thing, why didn't they just kill him too?
Why, indeed.
And there's other things. I mean, why did they even know where they were if they got in a taxi? They followed the taxi? Is that what we're supposed to think?
Well, it's just too far-fetched.
It's very far-fetched. Graham said he didn't tell his brother about the men either. And why wouldn't he?
Yeah, I mean, that's big news, right?
He just went back to the disco and came home as if everything was fine.
Yeah.
So he and Glenn returned to the apartment, and Graham said that he assumed the men had taken Kim and they'd left. So why he didn't call the police is another good question.
Right. And he didn't say anything to his brother.
No, he didn't say, hey, there were these guys at the apartment, so we better be careful going back. You know, even if he didn't want to tell the police, you think he would have warned his brother or something, right? It's just fantastical.
It is. And it gets better. The next morning after Glenn had left, Graham said the men returned to the apartment. Kim's body was in a spare bedroom.
Yes, so we're supposed to believe he never checked before he went to bed that night.
Right, he never did anything.
Nope.
Just went to bed, woke up, and there those guys are back again. So they made Graham watch them as they dismembered Kim's body, and then they left the remains with him for him to dispose of them.
There's so many reasons that I don't believe that. I can't even get into it.
Well, it's too many.
Yeah.
Now, Graham had run off the following Tuesday because he was afraid the men would come back for him or his family members.
So that's according to him.
That's the word according to Graham.
So Dawn, a sympathetic mom, felt sorry for her son, and she stayed with him the whole night. Cherie came to the Potter's house the next day, and she was just thrilled to see him. So Cherie and Graham spent hours together, and he told her a similar but kind of a different story. According to what he told Cherie, the two men had returned the day after Graham had picked up Cherie's car. And he also said that the men had killed Kim with a rolling pin, which he had thrown in a garbage bin. So Sonny, ever the concerned father, discussed things with Graham, who agreed that calling the police was the right thing to do. And he told his father that he had done nothing wrong and he wanted to help the police. I'd have to argue that if he got rid of her body, that is doing something wrong. But he said that he assumed the police would come from Sydney to question him at the house, so he went and got into the bath. But he was soon surprised because as soon as the detectives learned he was there, they came right over and they entered the bathroom. I mean, he'd already fled. They weren't going to take any more chances.
Right.
He requested his privacy, and his family was all very supportive of him. But the detectives weren't going to let him out of their sight at all. So while they're there, Cherie's in the living room screaming at the detectives, calling them bastards, and saying that they had been betrayed by the police. So this is just wacky.
Graham's arrested, taken away for questioning. According to the police, there were 2 detectives that day, and no guns were drawn. But the Potters and the Joneses would say later that there were 10 or more police, with guns. At the station, Graham gave his name and date of birth. Then, on the advice of his lawyer, he refused to say anything else, and he was formally charged with Kim Barry's murder.
Yeah, but still Graham's attorney argued for bail, saying that Graham had returned just to clear his name. But because he'd changed his appearance and left the area, bail was denied. He also refused to give blood or hair samples to the police. So Graham's attorney identified 3 points that the police could prove and that Graham would not be able to deny. Number 1, Kim was last seen alive in his company. Number 2, after her disappearance, he fled the area and changed his appearance. And number 3, Kim's blood was found in his apartment, not in one place, but in several places. So in response to the information about the blood, Graham tried to say that the police had not told him about finding blood or hairs or any physical evidence in his apartment. He added to his story that Kim had handed him her purse when they were in the taxi together because she told him she had no money for the fare. And he said that in her purse he saw the whole bottom of her purse was packed with plastic bags filled with light brown capsules. So he claimed there were dozens of them, as if she was selling drugs.
Right.
But this was in contradiction to what Donna remembered seeing in Kim's bag earlier that evening. She'd already told police she hadn't seen any drugs in there.
And then there's that question that you posed. If they took a taxi to Graham's apartment, how did the 2 guys that were threatening Kim know where they were? They must have followed them in the car.
Yeah, it just makes it more unlikely.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So after his committal hearing, Graham Potter was kept in custody, awaiting trial. And the prosecution gave this theory about how the murder had happened. Kim went with Graham back to his apartment, but once there she decided not to have sex with him. Maybe she learned he had a girlfriend, or fiancé, but for whatever reason, she declined to have sex with him. And this sent him into a rage. So he hit her on the head, left her unconscious in his apartment when he returned to the disco alone.
You remember Kim's stomach was empty at autopsy, and investigators knew that Kim and Donna had eaten before they went out that night. So she had to be alive long enough for the food to be completely digested. So this meant that Kim probably didn't die immediately when he hit her, but she was unconscious when he left her behind. And dying. So when Graham returned home, they think he saw that Kim was still alive and he struck her again, likely with the rolling pin that he had later disposed of. And when this didn't kill her, he strangled her. When Kim's skull was found, her teeth had that pink discoloration on the back of them. And remember, this means that capillaries, the tiny ones inside the teeth, had burst. And this is something that has been forensically linked with death by strangulation.
Now, the prosecution's case was circumstantial with some forensic evidence. The markings on Kim's finger bones were identified as matching Graham's hacksaw. That's grisly. For his defense, Graham was the only witness. He was allowed to give his statement as a doc statement. This meant that he didn't have to go through cross-examination. So basically, they're reading a statement from him.
Yeah, how did they do that?
I don't know.
Yeah, we should look into that, because it doesn't seem fair.
The defense closed by saying that the police had no motive and that the 2 different methods of removing Kim's fingers proved that 2 men were involved. Why would it?
It wouldn't. I mean, if you do it one way and it's taking a long time or something, then you might do it a different way. So in April of 1982, Graham Potter was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison. But it really doesn't mean life in prison. He did marry Cherie while he was incarcerated. She was loyal to him. But then in 1993, he escaped the jail with another inmate, even though they were caught the next day. Then in 1987, the bag with Kim's jewelry, purse, clothing, and the rolling pin were found. And the purse had no drugs in it. It still had $2, which Kim had been saving for her cab fare home. In 1993, Graham Potter's life sentence was reviewed by the Supreme Court, and his prison term was reduced to 12 years and 8 months. So he ended up serving just 14 years for Kim's murder before being released on parole in 1996. The parole board said that he was rehabilitated and he was no longer a danger to society. I don't know what that was based on. I know that his family was very involved in defending him, though.
So in 2002, Sherry and Graham Potter moved to Tasmania's east coast, and Graham became involved in the selling of drugs. Now they were building their dream home, and they were seemingly leading just a nice, peaceful life.
This wasn't like selling a little pot here and there. He was involved in the drug trade pretty deeply.
Yes, he was.
In 2008, with a federal investigation, Graham was arrested for his involvement in the drug trade, and he was charged with importing over $400 million in cocaine and ecstasy. This was the largest investigation undertaken by the AFP, involving 400 officers, 10,000 hours of surveillance, and 185,000 telephone intercepts. He was extradited to Victoria, but then, inexplicably, he was granted bail.
Yeah, what's with that?
I don't know. But with this whole thing, apparently Cherie was devastated because Graham had promised her this new crime-free life in a small town, and it didn't go that way.
No. So while he was out on bail, he continued to live his criminal life. He became involved with organized crime in Melbourne, and he was a killer for hire. Victoria police alleged that he and 2 other men were conspiring to kill 2 men at an upcoming wedding. These alleged targets, were to be killed because of a fallout between members of a drug syndicate busted by federal and Victoria police. In 2009, Potter was again released on bail. And guess what? He didn't show up for his arraignment in February 2010, and he's been a fugitive since that time. It's known that he moved to Tully, Queensland. There's CCTV footage of Potter at a store. During his time there, he had a long, bushy beard. Neighbors said he blended into the small community where he lived. Now, the police spotted him for the last time in August of 2010, but he was able to escape into the bush following a routine police traffic stop. By this time, apparently, Sherry had gotten a little smarter, and she had left him.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when she left him or if he just left her behind, but she wasn't with him anymore, and he was seen with another woman who was thought to be involved with a lot of these crimes. So in 2013, there were several tips that Potter was working on a farm in southern New South Wales, but none of that was confirmed. In an interview with the Daily Telegraph in 2015, Dawn Potter, Graham's mom, said her son ran when his life was in danger after he had turned police informant. So she said a return to prison was as good as a death sentence to him, so he really had no choice but to run. And she said she just hopes he's safe. So she's going to back him up till the bitter end.
Still working for him. So Graham Potter is on Australia's most wanted list. He has been rated number 1 on the list. Police say that he is an expert at changing his appearance, glasses, wigs, even a fat suit. And he's gone by numerous aliases, including Peter Adams, Jim Henderson, Josh Lawson, and John Page. In 2019, the Sydney Morning Herald released photos showing details of Potter's life as a fugitive. He's now in his 60s. The photos were taken at a campsite that was raided by police.
Yeah, the photos they released showed food stockpiles, some circled want ads, and some notes threatening to kill anyone who turned him in. Also some knives. But they didn't find him. They just found his tent and were able to figure out that he had been there by putting together information from witnesses and from the items that were found. So police believe he's probably living in a rural area. He does have experience in many different trades, including welding, beekeeping, and farm work, so it's easy for him to find kind of under-the-table employment. He's lived in caravan parks, campsites, and he's rented homes. But it's believed that he's also continued to victimize women. One elderly widow who he befriended had a friend who recognized him, and when she confronted him, he threatened to kill her if she called the police. Then he took off again.
Boom. There's a $100,000 reward for information leading to his capture. Police advise the public not to confront him, but to call Crime Stoppers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put the number and the website in our show notes in case anyone's seen him. We do have quite a few Aussie listeners.
We do.
Yeah, speaking of that, this case was actually given to us by Lisa from Australia. She gave me a book about it. And when I started reading it, I thought it was about the murder of a young woman. And then I found out all this other stuff that had happened since. And it's really quite a story.
It certainly is.
But I like how the book really concentrates more on Kim Berry and her family's loss of her than on what was going on with Graham Potter, although it's a very sensational story, that's for sure. So our sources are the Sydney Morning Herald from July 2019. Letters detail how murderer accused would-be hitman lives on the run, and that was written by Rachel Eddy. There's also the book that Lisa gave me, The Stranger You Know by John Sutter Lint. There's a magazine article from That's Life online magazine, and the title of that is Australia's Most Wanted Head and Fingers Killer is Still at Large. That's from September 2017 by Amber Wemyss. The Examiner from February 2011 also had a really good article titled Life and Crimes, Tassie Bid to Escape Murky Past. There's a documentary on Wanted TV titled Graham Potter's Australia's #1 Most Wanted. And that doesn't really cover Kim Berry's murder at all. It's just about the police's chase for Graham Potter since the 2000s. So a lot of fascinating stuff out there.
A lot.
TCB's music was written and produced by Tristan Capel. Just a few housekeeping notes before we move on to feedback. I want to remind everyone about the contest, the beer review contest. I think the contest is going to end the end of April, so get your review in. Just record yourself reviewing one of your favorite beers, just as Dick does in the beginning of each of our shows. And he's going to be the sole judge on these. So what are you looking for in these reviews, Dick?
I'm looking for witty, charming, suave, sophisticated.
Wow. So a lot like what you do.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the prize is a good one because I'm giving away a pair of my favorite Bluetooth earbuds. And these are waterproof and great for exercising, pretty much anything. You can listen to podcasts wherever you are with these wonderful earbuds. If you happen to be interested in getting some extra TCB episodes and giving us a little bit of support, we have some good stuff coming up in our True Crime Brewery Premium feed. And you can get access to that by subscribing on our website, tiegrabber.com. These commercial-free, members-only episodes come out every month. Plus, there's a backlog of over 40 episodes that are all yours to listen to as soon as you become a member. You can be a member for as little as $4 a month, and when you join, we're also going to send you a gift with a handwritten note thanking you. So just go to tiegrabber.com and click on subscribe to learn more. So we're going to move on to feedback. If you have a case suggestion or comments about a crime or even a beer, send us a voicemail. We have a widget on our website on the right side of the screen. You just click on that, and using your microphone on your computer or whatever other device, you leave us a message. If you're too shy for that, you can send us an email with your comments or suggestions. Or you can write to us on our True Crime Brewery fan discussion page. Wherever you want to send us a message. We'll get it, Dick will read it, we'll talk about it, and then it might end up on one of our future shows. So if you want to send us an email with a suggestion or comments, you can send that to truecrimebrewery@tiegrabber.com.
It's easy.
It's easy and much appreciated.
Okay, time for feedback. The
Okay.
voicemail's from Elizabeth, and she just has some general comments.
Hi, Dick and Jill. This is Liz from Atlanta, Georgia. First off, I just wanted to say, when I heard that Dick taught at the University of South Carolina, I was so excited. I'm a USC graduate, and all I got to say about that is go Cox. During this hard time, and yes, I'm talking about the coronavirus, unlike anything I've ever seen, but I have found a lot of peace in y'all's soothing voices, and I think y'all have very intelligent banter. So I have been listening and listening and listening. My cat even likes y'all. She actually leaves the room when some of the podcasts are on, but with y'all, she just gets right up to me and cuddles up and listens. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank y'all for all the hard work, and I'm hoping maybe one day I'll see you at the Quiet Inn. Happy quarantine. Love y'all.
Well, thanks a lot, Liz. Happy quarantine to you. I hope you're staying safe and healthy.
But yeah, she likes listening to us, and I would say go Cox to Liz.
That's right. And I always make fun of you when you say that.
I know. Something dirty about it, right?
I just have that kind of mind, I guess.
I
Because
think so.
It goes right there every time.
You're not alone.
That's true. I'm sure I'm not. Okay, so we have an email from Carol Ann.
This is from YouTube, Carol Ann Freeling Ghost.
All right.
And I didn't write her letter because it was one sentence. It was basically, do the case of Dominique Dunn.
Okay.
And the farce of a trial.
Okay, so she's the daughter of, what's his name? Dunn. Is his name Dominic?
She's from a famous family.
Yeah.
She played the teenage daughter in the film Poltergeist.
Right, but isn't her dad the famous guy who does a show? He does a crime show? Dominic Dunn? And he wrote a book about the O.J. Simpson case? Well, we'll look it up and see. But I think it might be because I remember him talking about his daughter's murder. So I think I'm right here. Yeah, so Dominic Dunn, he had a TV show where he covered crimes. He wrote a book about the O.J. Simpson case. He may have written a book about his daughter's murder as well. But yes, she was the older daughter in the film Poltergeist. And she was strangled to death by her ex-boyfriend, John Sweeney, in 1982.
Yeah, this was another one of those abusive relationships, stalker types. She had gotten a restraining order against him, and he appeared at her doorstep one day, wanted to talk. She agreed to talk with him, and he strangled her.
You know, he only got voluntary manslaughter.
That's what Carol Ann feels like is the travesty.
Sure.
Right.
Served 3.5 years in jail, that's it?
3.5 years for voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah, that is a travesty.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think that'd be a good case to do.
Absolutely, I think so. I mean, I remember back then there was this whole thing among the kids about how anyone who was in Poltergeist was damned. Although I think both the people who played parents were fine, but something happened to the little blonde girl.
The little blonde girl.
Had an illness.
Yeah, she died young.
Yeah. So both of the kids, I guess there's a boy too. I don't know what happened to him. But both of their daughters from that movie had died. And of course, you know, as kids, trying to make it into something because it's a scary movie they were in. Of course, it wasn't related, I'm sure.
No.
No. All right, then we have a case suggestion from Megan.
Megan wrote, I love listening to your podcast. I'm a nurse by profession, but now I'm a stay-at-home mom. Housework used to be dreaded, but now I find myself doing more laundry just to listen a little longer.
All right, so we've helped her out in a positive way there.
See? I love hearing Dick's medical take on the cases and the detail you all put into every case. I have a personal connection with the Lacey Spears case and think you all did an amazing job covering it. I love the smoothness and pace of the episodes and how respectful you all are of the other's opinion. I really enjoyed the movie breakdown episodes. And well,
those were just fun for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to do more of those.
Well, Megan has some suggestions.
Oh, cool.
Fracture, Primal Fear, and A Perfect Murder.
Okay, do we know those?
Well,
Primal Fear,
we
we do.
Primal Fear.
Yeah.
The most famous true crime case I remember in my area is the murder of Karen Tipton. I'd like to hear your take on the case.
Yeah, Karen Tipton was sexually assaulted and murdered in her home back in 1999. Daniel Wademore, whose DNA was linked to the murder, was charged, tried, and convicted. And this verdict was overturned, and a second trial was declared a mistrial. And then in the next trial, he was found not guilty. So that would be an interesting one.
Well, I'm just wondering, and I didn't look too much into it, if his DNA was linked to the murder, how's he get away with it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, look at O.J. Simpson. There was mixed blood everywhere. I mean, people get away with it. Good lawyer, I guess, or bad prosecutor.
Right.
But these things do happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it looked like a good case.
Yeah, that sounds like a good case. That one and the poltergeist one are both really good because there's a lot to talk about as far as getting justice, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, you ready to wrap it up for the day?
Yes, I think my swimming pool is calling me.
That's right. At least we live somewhere warm where we can go outside and enjoy the pool.
We'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you next week at the quiet end.
We'll look for you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.